Hey everyone, and welcome to another video, and today I'm sharing with you my AHRI guide. Now I need to do a quick shout out, Ajax, a AHRI player from the MLA who helped me put together this guide. I've put his Twitch below, his Discord and OPGG if you're interested. Really nice guy, very helpful. Shout out Ajax, getting into the guide, why AHRI? Now, there are a lot of mage players out there who want a little bit of mobility in their pool, but they don't really want to play a hardcore assassin. They don't want to play a LeBlanc and a Kali or a Zed or whatever it might be. And so AHRI is that good little middle ground, right? It gives you a bit of mobility in your pool, great into high threat compositions. Now, AHRI in her current form is actually quite a solid blind pick. Traditionally, she wasn't the best blind pick, but now because of all the different itemization choices, she's very solid as a blind. She's great for learning the game holistically, good in high elo because of that adaptability to chaos, especially with effectiveness with cheap mythics. Now, I will need to caveat this video with a little bit of a note here that AHRI is in a strong state. Now, if you do pick up AHRI right now, it wouldn't surprise me if she does receive a little bit of a nerf in the near future, but it won't really change her identity in any way, shape, or form, so don't worry about it too much. Just want to kind of put that out there, though, and hence why you're seeing her a lot in competitive, we're seeing her banned in solo queue. Her popularity has risen a lot. Now we're going to get into AHRI's identity and mindset. Now, AHRI has changed a hell of a lot over the past year. She is a very versatile mage now. She can actually be played many differing ways. Back in the day, she was basically primarily a hardcore kind of like one-shot assassin. You would basically only see her with Ludens and things like that. Now she's got a lot more mythic choices. She has a lot more versatility with her identity. So therefore, when you're playing AHRI, one of my biggest pieces of advice is that you want alignment between runes, items, and style, and your play style. So if you go, Ludens, you want to make sure that you're ticking all these boxes. Your runes, your items, Ludens, and all these, and also the way you play AHRI in the game itself all need to make sense. So one of the big themes of this guide is that I'm going to be kind of sharing, okay, what adaptations do we need to make to our gameplay and our runes and our items to make sure that each of these three things are in perfect alignment, and that's going to help you a lot within your solo queue games. Now, little note here as well, you ideally need to specialize when you're learning AHRI, and even just in general when you're climbing. Most AHRI players are going to specialize in a specific style, and then once they gain a lot of mastery and learn AHRI through that lens, then and only then can you start to expand and play all the differing styles. I do think at the highest level, you should be able to kind of alternate between all kind of three, the assassin, the facilitator, and the carry. But at the start, I do think you're better off kind of specializing in one of them, and we'll talk about what that AHRI learning journey will look like later on within the guide. Now for the juicy stuff, getting into the details, starting with runes. This is the first rune page. There's a lot of rune pages. We're going to cover them all, don't you worry. Stock standard Electro setup. I would say this is one of the most stock standard setups for AHRI. Electrocute synergizes well with her burst-oriented trades. I'm personally a big fan of Taste of Blood for lane control. Sometimes you see both of these, Sudden Impact and Cheap Shot. I wouldn't worry about them. Not really that consistent. If you want to have consistent lane phase, Taste of Blood is the way to go. Eyeball Collection. Now you can go Treasure Hunter. You actually can go a lot of these ones down the bottom here. The reason being is you can go Ingenious, works really well with Everfrost. If you're building Everfrost, you can go Treasure Hunter to get you snowballing more off your first R usage. Personally, I stick to Ultimate Hunter because your kit revolves largely around your R cooldown. So I like to keep it very simple and basically go Ultimate Hunter no matter what if I'm going for the red tree. Now, again, Inspiration Secondary. I'm a massive fan of DMATs on AHRI personally. The reason being is that it helps you with your wave clear breakpoint. So if you actually put 2 of their DMATs onto the casters by level 7, you actually can one-shot the backline with 1 Q. If you have a certain amount of AP, we'll talk about this later. So I kind of like that with AHRI. And even if I don't choose to use my DMATs that way, sometimes I like it for aiding me in getting cannons and things like that. I know some AHRI players also like putting them on the melees as well to help with the melee breakpoint. I'm personally, it's a very flexible rune and it is largely preference. I think Cosmic Insight though is very important because of how well she uses her flash, TP, and reducing that ultimate cooldown. All of that is amazing. She works really well with ability haste. All of these could also work as well. Even magical footwear here. These are all personal preference. Play around with what you like and what works well for your elo bracket. But I would personally start off with DMAT and Cosmic Insight if you want a stock standard rune page. Same thing here. You can also go secondary sorcery. A lot of Ahris like the sorcery because the mana flow helps with your mana in the early game. She can be quite mana intensive. We're starting to see a lot more Scorch on Ahri as well, typically with the first strike setup, which we'll touch on later on. But, you know, you can't really go wrong with Transcendence on Ahri. Obviously, it's a bit more of a scaling choice. If you want more lane control, you want to go that Scorch. If you want more scaling, you want to go the Transcendence. She works very well with ability haste. You'd sometimes see Absolute Focus for the wave clear and Gathering for ultimate scaling. I typically don't bother with these. If I am going to go Sorcery secondary, I will go Mana Flow and Scorch or Mana Flow and Transcendence, depending on how much scaling I want within my setup. Now, you will see this setup actually taken into a lot of Mage v Mage matchups. So if you see Ahri versus Syndra, Ahri versus Victor, Ahri versus Orianna, you will actually see kind of the bone plating overgrowth with Ahri secondary. It gives her a little bit more trading strength, allows her to kind of face check some of those combos to kind of get into W range and stuff like that. So I'll actually show a VOD later on, I believe, with this setup. This is actually more of a new setup. You didn't usually used to see this back in the day, but it's actually kind of a new innovation in Mage v Mage matchups because she does kind of get outranged and outpoked, and Ahri does have typically a weak early lane. I personally don't go this setup all that often, but something you can play around with in those Mage v Mage matchups. AHRI, also very good with Ahri, especially into the lower range matchups. So if you're playing Ahri into, say, like a Kiana, a Fizz, even like a Kali, a lot of lower range matchups, you can opt in for the AHRI because then you're less tied to, you know, landing all three abilities and you can get in range to auto attack a lot. To proc those auto Ws and just simple auto attack trades. So this could also really work well. I personally don't find myself going this all that often because I'm a big first strike abuser right now. But again, for the same reasons, this all works into those lower range matchups. Now, there's two other options here. Now, this has been my personal favorite. Chovy has actually been popularizing this one with the first strike. So typically he goes first strike, Magical Footwear, DMAT, Cosmic Insight with Mana Flow Scorch. Now, the theory behind this setup is that Ahri doesn't have the strongest early lane, right? Ahri nowadays is best played as more of like a scaling into mid-game spiking mage, okay? And so what First Strike does is it obviously gives you a little bit more gold in the early game, helps you get to your key breakpoints, whether it be your Ludens, your Everforce, whatever it might be. But more importantly, I believe it actually out-damages Electrocute by level 9. Don't quote me on that one. Roughly around that time, it roughly out-damages Electrocute relatively early into the game, so it's a much better scaling rune. And because you're not typically winning lane anyway, it can be a great way of kind of ensuring or at least bolstering up your mid-game power spike. Now, what you'll see, though, is you'll see Scorch paired with it. You might think, well, that doesn't make sense. Well, the reasoning is that it kind of bolsters up your early game, because if you go full scaling, if you went kind of first strike and then you went Transcendence with Mana Flow, you've basically got no early lane strength. So typically what I've been seeing from Chovy as well is balancing out that first strike with a Scorch. And this is actually the setup that I've been going the most. I think it's the most flexible, and I like the feeling of kind of scaling into the mid game with Ahri. If you feel as though you don't like that, you really like the early game strength with Electro Ahri, that's totally on you. Play around with all of them and see what feels good for you. Now, also you'll see Spellbook. People ask me all the time, why Spellbook? When should I take Spellbook and how should I use it? The only matchups that I would take Spellbook are when you're versing ones where you really need cleanse. So if you're versing something like a Lissandra, sometimes even into Zoe if you really want to, TF, things like that, but specifically into Lissandra, Spellbook is really good because then you can actually swap to cleanse, so you can use the TP in the early game to swap to cleanse. This is, I would say, more so a competitive rune, but yes, in solo queue, if I'm versing Lissandra, I will want to go for that Spellbook because playing Ahri into a Lissandra without cleanse is an absolute pain in the ass. If you don't like Magical Footwear and you want to go for early Lucidity, which a lot of the high elo players do in those fast-paced games, you can also opt in for Stopwatch. Depends on what your preference is. Do you like to go early tier 2 boots or do you not like to go early tier 2 boots? That really is preference as well. Moving on to build. Again, a lot of people get confused about this stuff, so we're going to get into the details here. Seaport versus Doran's. If you want to play a fast-paced Ahri lane, C-Pod is really good. C-Pod, I would say, is quite good into those mage v mage matchups where there's a lot of heavy trading. You again versing a Syndra, a Victor, and Ori, especially paired with that secondary bone plating. That's something you can opt in for. Also somewhat good in those mid-range matchups like Talia and things like that. I personally don't go C-Pod all that often. I like the durability from the Doran since Ahri is quite squishy. Sometimes you'll see the AHRIs that start C-Pod go straight into a Doran's for the durability. Again, I don't really recommend that. I personally don't really like delaying my Lost Chapter. I think Lost Chapter is such an important item for Ahri because of how well she uses ability haste and how much she needs the mana. Again, that's personal preference. So play around with the C-Pod and the Doran, see what feels good for you. Typically on first base, you'll see a lot of people try to actually skip all of these items and go straight to Lucidity. The reason you'll see this is because it is a much earlier spiking setup. It gives you, that immediate burst of ability haste, helps with your wave clear, helps with getting nice quality resets, it helps you attending skirmishes, all that good stuff. So typically you'll see that with people that like to go Everfrost and get shit done in the early game. Some AHRIs really don't like to rush that because they don't want to skip Dark Seal because they're going to be involved in a lot of fights. They want to get that Dark Seal stacking up in the early game. And then some AHRI players don't go the Dark Seal. They don't rush the Lucidity. They won't even go boost because they'll have magical footwear and they'll try and stay in lane for 1300. These are all completely viable ways of playing your AHRI. What I recommend is trying all of these kind of strategies. The tier 2 boot rush, the Lost Chapter boot, the Lost Chapter rush, early basing for Dark Seal, Amtube. Try them all based off, how you like to navigate your matchups and see what feels good for you. Because remember, guys, when it comes to itemization, why it's so preferential is because the optimal setup might depend on how you like to play your AHRI, as well as what rank you're at and how the games play out on your particular server. When you watch Chovy and the games are very fast paced, he's probably more inclined to rush something like a Lucidity to get going and get shit done and have that early game versatility. If I'm playing in Gold and NA, I might actually not want to go that and actually just save straight up for my Lost Chapter because the games might be a little bit slower paced, right? So these are things that you need to play around with. Now, as for what boots you go for, if I'm going Ludens and I want to go for that one-shot style of Assassin AHRI, I will basically always go Sorks. If I'm going Everfrost, you can go Sorks, but typically I would find myself going Lucidity, and I'll find myself either going Lucidity or Mercs if I need it. Typically because you don't really need the pen and you want to have that earlier spiking. One of the big advantages of Everfrost is that it is a cheaper mythic. Hence why you'll see Everfrost and solo queue in the higher elo brackets because they want to get shit done in the early game. It has a lot more 2v2 skirmish strength. So yeah, spiking in the early game, cheaper mythic, synergizes as well with a lot of ability haste. You're basically a stacking ability haste and getting a lot done and getting the ball rolling. So here you have kind of the three styles, right? Assassin one shot, kind of like a hybrid, bit of utility, earlier spiking, and then more 2v2 oriented, and then you have kind of this scaling Liandry's 2 to 3 item spiking mythic. Typically, if you're versing a lot of tanks and you feel as though you want to play more front-to-back team fights, that's where Liandry's comes into play. If you want to spike earlier, get shit done, take plenty of 2v2s, or you want a little bit more durability into a lot of lower range champions and assassins, you go Everfrost. If you feel like you're versing a lot of squishies and your sole AP, going Ludens with Sorks and playing with Electro-Ignite is a great way to kind of get shit done and be a very annoying assassin threat. We're going to talk later on a little bit more about these mythics in the guide and kind of when you would want to go each of them and how it influences your gameplay. But at a very surface level, like I said here, Assassin, good into squishies. Everfrost, good into low-range comps when you need the durability and if you want to spike earlier, fast-paced games. Liandry's when you're versing heavy tank compositions and you feel as though the game is going to be more oriented around mid to late game front-to-back team fights. Now, Roa is also a mythic. I'm not really going to be covering Roa today. I don't believe in Roa as an item on AHRI. Now, some people like Roa on AHRI into Assassin matchups because it gives you a shit ton of durability, and you'll see Roa as something into like a Cosmic Drive second item because you get plenty of durability here. You just want to stack ability, haste, and movement speed off your second item. Typically, you also see it with the Lucidity as well because you don't get any ability haste from Roa. So yeah, you'll sometimes see AHRI v Z players, if they play AHRI into Z, they'll go Roa for the durability. I personally would much prefer one of these mythics. So again, play around with it. I don't think it's an essential mythic for AHRI players. I think that's more for people that really want to specialize and maybe become the one trick with AHRI. They might want to play around with that. Now for second item, Horizon Focus is very good on AHRI. Now the big kind of debate has been Shadow Flame versus Horizon Focus. Now, something you got to remember is that Shadow Flame gives 50 more HP, right? 50 more HP, but it actually doesn't give any ability haste. Whereas Horizon Focus gives ability haste, has 50 less 50 HP, but it's actually more damage, and it's more damage. So typically what you'll actually see is, unless you're getting a lot of value from the passive in terms of the in relation to shields and dealing with those shields, you typically just want to go Everfrost straight into Horizon Focus because it gives you more damage. So this is the most common build path right now: Lucidity, Everfrost into Horizon Focus. You don't need the HP because you're already getting the HP from the Everfrost, and then you can proc the Horizon Focus passive with Everfrost because it procs off slows and immobilizes, right? So typically then what you would want to do is you would use your Everfrost, and then you would proc the Horizon Focus, and then you could dump your full combo onto the enemy and get a load of damage. Typically though, if you're going Ludens, I would actually prefer you probably go the Shadow Flame, purely because you just need probably that little bit of extra HP. But again, it is personal preference, and you have less ways to proc the Horizon's Focus. So they're typically the two most common mythics after this one. If you are going Liandry's, I would again prefer Shadow Flame. Yeah, Shadow Flame probably, or maybe even Banshees for a little bit of durability. But again, you're not really going to get much value from Horizon Focus without the Everfrost passive. Cosmic Drive isn't really as good anymore because it doesn't give any HP. Typically, back in the day when Cosmic Drive gave HP, I would love to go Liandry's into Cosmic, but I don't really think that's viable anymore. I think you'd only want to build Cosmic Drive with Roa. That's the only situation which I build Cosmic. For me right now, I'm typically going, Ludens, Shadow Flame, Everfrost, Horizon Focus, Liandry, Shadow Flame, and then mix in, Void Staff, Banshee, Zhonya's, Deathcap, however you see fit. But typically, that's the build path right there. If you have any questions about items, I'll be happy to answer them in the comment section below. Summoners, keep it very simple, TP and Ignite. Now, I am a massive fan of TP on AHRI, and the reason being is because it gives you that flexibility heading into the mid game. I feel like AHRI has so many she's so versatile. There's so many ways you can play fights. I love the ability to come in late or TP in creative flank windows or whatever. I just love that TP aspect for mid game. Also, AHRI has a very weak early lane, so having TP allows me to keep my farm up in the early lane, especially into those harder matchups. If you are going Electrocute and you want to play for the Ludens setup and you're versing a very squishy team composition, Ignite can be really good with Ludens, Electrocute, Ignite. Gives you a great triple threat synergy there to burst targets. Typically, I'd only go Ignite in matchups where they are relatively easy to minimize and I don't need that TP to come back for a tempo reset or something like that. So now we're going to be getting into some trading tips, getting into the details here. The first one, classic basic trading pattern you'll see into basically any lower range matchups is auto W auto to proc that Electrocute. Sometimes even auto W and then Q, and utilizing that W movement speed to get a nice quality Q. So typically what you're aiming for is just to proc that Electrocute if you are going Electrocute, or proc that First Strike. So typically, again, procking that Electrocute either with auto, W auto, or auto, W Q. As you can see here in these lower range matchups, look at that, auto, W, auto, Q. So typically you also want to play around with utilizing the W movement speed to avoid skill shots. Here's a little clip from someone in the MLA. LeBlanc goes in with the W into E, and then he uses the W movement speed to avoid the chain. So that's actually something you really need to play around with. So I really want to get into specifics of what makes a good Q and a bad Q. Getting very competent with your Q usage is the key to success with the lane phase with AHRI. So a good Q is when you're really clipping them with the Q1, Q2, like that. See that? So you see how I jammed him up in the corner here, and I didn't rush my Q. A lot of AHRIs here in this sort of situation would rush their Q. They would just spam the Q right now. But I know that if I walk up and close the gap, they're going to be a little bit closer, makes them panic, and then I'm able to get that Q1, Q2 just like that. What you're aiming for is you're aiming so that the Q just is at that perfect range where it goes back and forth very, very quickly so they don't have time to dodge it. Here's another good cue here. Look at that, beautiful. That is a good cue, getting that clip at the end. And this requires good quality tethering. If I step too far forward and I'm too close to the enemy, and the gap between the cue reaches there and there, they can easily sidestep the back half of that cue. So typically what you want to do is you want to stay, at that tip of the cue range, so you get that insta Q1, Q2. This is an okay cue. Not an amazing one. I had the right idea. I was trying to reposition the cue with the W movement speed. This is what a bad cue looks like. So let's really look at this one. This is a bad cue here. So it's a little bit too linear. It's not even really in range. It's not timed with the last hit. Really, really not good. And if you find yourself doing a lot of cues like this, where it's not timed with the last hit, you're not overwhelming their mental stack by getting in range and threatening the auto W with the movement speed, you're not clipping them with the Q1, QT, then you need to do some investigation and really laser focus on it. Here's another terrible cue. Way too linear, not even timed with the last hit, not even really in range properly. And here is a vomit-worthy cue. I want to vomit all over my keyboard. Way too linear. And let's look at this. She knows I'm looking. He's not even looking to posture up right now. He completely baits it out. It's not even remotely close. Again, you guys need to really pay attention to these cues. Even though it sounds basic, when I do a lot of AHRI coaching in my Mid-Lane Academy program, people will go through the lane phase. We'll get into and they'll be like, oh yeah, I've got mid-game problems. Well, yeah, you have mid-game problems, but dude, if you're missing, 40% of your cues in lane, the mid-game doesn't matter because your lane phase is you set the game in this alternate trajectory where you're in an unfortunate situation. So charm usage, okay, so here getting into the details, what you typically want to get into the habit of doing is holding the charm to overwhelm the enemy mental stack. So here you'll see the AHRI player walk up quite aggressively, holds the charm, overwhelms the enemy mental stack, then uses the charm. Because if the AHRI player walks up and just uses it instantly, it's very easy for the enemy to kind of avoid it. So patience is key with your charm usage. Don't be afraid of holding it, milking it, overwhelming their mental stack, and then casting the charm. Never underestimate the simple threat of holding the E and holding the charm. So let's continue on, guys. So to ensure you guys understand the significance of these lane tips, I'm actually just going to go through an early lane phase of Chovy playing AHRI into Cassiopeia. I really want to emphasize Chovy as a player because I feel like he is probably one of the best AHRI players in the entire world, and he has complete mastery over AHRI trading patterns, and there's a lot we can learn from him. So let's go over the first early lane here and see him execute a lot of these lane tips we just covered before. So it starts off with a W auto trade. One thing you'll see when you watch really good AHRI players is that they focus a lot on getting max value from this W, especially like the early levels 1 to 4. I would say in the early lane, you want to be directing most of your attention on W, either to gap close or look for auto W autos or even avoid skill shots. And then later on, as the lane goes on, the lanes become more centered around the Q. Holding the wave neutral. We'll talk about how to approach the differing lane matchups in a moment. We're going to go through all the different types of lanes that you will face. Utilizing W to get in range there. Look at that beautiful creative trade there. You see him also proc that Scorch. Making sure he's proccing it as often as he possibly can. Making sure you're getting comfortable with utilizing that W movement speed to get in range is really nice. Trying to get that level 2. Tries to bait out the Q, but ends up getting nailed by it. Looks for a little short trade here to proc that Electro. So let's take a look at this short trade here. So walks up, gets nailed by the Q, then walks up, goes for a Q, tries to reposition, ends up just proccing the Electrocute there, looking for a bit of a heavy trade. Beautiful sidestep there. And now look at that Q right there. Baits out the Q. Look at that, pretends he's going to walk up, baits out that Q, doesn't even bother about going for that minion. Literally gives up the minion to go for the trade. Trading more important than minions in this situation, given it's such a heavy trading matchup. And then is able to land both that Q1, Q2. That is a perfectly spaced and ranged Q right there. Very, very nice. And then W, disengaging, utilizing the movement speed to prevent Cassio from continuing to chase. Now he's got Cassio in a very good position here. So very good spacing there. Very good patience with abilities. Baits out the Q. Walks up aggressively, has charm available right now, just zoning, not rushing his abilities, just chilling. Looks like Cassio's likely going to reset. Cassio resets. Chovy stays in lane. He's actually got quite a lot of gold, but he has TP, so he's probably maybe saving for a Lucidity. Potentially see Chovy go for a lot of Lucidity boot rush. Sometimes you'll see him rush Lost Chapter, but not as much nowadays. Wave's in a very good position. Looks like his team's pincering. Catches the wave under tower. You'll see Chovy do this a lot where he stays in lane. He never wants to be the first one to base it out of his lane opponent. Like, he always wants to come back with the superior amount of gold over the enemy to have a better quality first base. So bases, surely he's going to be rushing Lucidity. We'll see what he buys here. Comes back, yep, Lucidity and a refill. Beautiful. Now look at his trading patterns. Walks up, tries to bait out the Q, auto WQ. Now look at this trade. Absolutely flawless, textbook what we're talking about before. Walks up, dodges the Q, auto, W, Q. And now look at that Q, Q1, Q2, instantly perfect range. That is an ideal trade. If you guys can look to replicate these sorts of Qs where it's perfectly on the tip, utilizing the movement speed to get in range to go for that as well, look at that, beautiful. Very, very nice. Postures up aggressively. Notice how he walks up and he doesn't even use his charm. He's just utilizing the threat of the charm. Baits out that W from the Cassio. The Cassio's probably panicking. Walks up, pretends to use abilities, doesn't use abilities whatsoever, overwhelming the enemy's mental stack. Not rushing abilities, still holding the Q, knowing that is a pretty low value Q there. Couldn't really get in range. Q's the wave. Tries to spot out the Cassio. Looks like Cassio goes for another reset. Maybe he'll try and deny the farm. Can't quite deny that cannon. Got a beautiful ward on that top side. Looks like he's playing for lane control here. Playing for shove. Bit of an interesting Q there. Another auto WQ there. Procs that electrocute. Notice how he hasn't used charm a single time. He's holding charm. The threat of the charm itself is creating space and preventing Cassio from walking into him. Look at that again. Look at these trading patterns, guys. Utilizing the W movement speed to get in range and get that beautiful clip on the end. The perfectly spaced Q1, Q2 there. Auto baits out the R, W movement speed repositions. Still holding charm. Still holding charm. Hasn't used charm a single time yet. Still holding charm. Look at that patience with charm, guys. Remember, if the enemy knows you have charm, that changes the way they trade onto you. They can't just blindly chase you. Cassio's getting very low. Still holding abilities, utilizing the threat of the abilities themselves. Viego's on that top side. Looks like he's hyper aware of that. Pings that one out. So we'll go a little bit further here. I'm just going to cover the early lane. Peels for disengage with that charm. That's the first charm we've actually seen him use. And it looks like he's actually saving for a straight Lost Chapter here. Burns the flash from the Cassio. Doesn't want to overcommit knowing that Viego's in the area. Again, very patient with charm usage. Pretty straightforward. So what you can take away here, guys, notice it's very patient laning, right? He's not really rushing charms. He's really utilizing his W to space and land that Q1, Q2. And look at this. Very slow, conservative, 76 CS by 8 minutes 30. This is what a successful lane phase looks like with AHRI. So now that we've already introduced kind of the laning basics in relation to trading, what I want to do is now talk kind of big picture in terms of kind of the strategy that you're going to employ in your laning phases. So there's actually three kind of, I guess if you were to simplify it, three types of lanes that you're going to face. There's going to be low range melee matchups, there's going to be more kind of mid-range matchups, and then there's going to be high range matchups. So we're going to go through a laning phase of each of them just to kind of get across a baseline strategy for each and every one of them. Before we dive into that, I just want to kind of introduce something holistically that kind of helped me in my AHRI journey as well. I like to kind of visualize AHRI's, I guess, entire game in three phases. There is kind of the levels 1 to 6. And the way you navigate this 1 to 6 depends on a few things. Number one, your style and how you like to navigate, your AHRI, whether it be fast and aggressive, whether it be more focused on scaling. There's also kind of the matchup specifics detailed into that matchup. And also kind of server differences and all that stuff in here. So sometimes it's going to be neutralizing. Sometimes you're actually going to play to win and dominate your opponent. Sometimes you're just going to be slowly losing, right? So typically we have 1 to 6 here. And this is kind of what we're going to cover in a moment. Post 6, around level 6, level 7, especially level 7 when you hit kind of your wave clear breakpoint, especially if you go for DMATs, DMATs on the casters, you can typically start to exert a little bit of pressure. And especially now that you get your ultimate, you kind of come online as a champion in terms of your skirmishing. Like your skirmishing potential rises significantly. This is where 2v2s become a lot more attractive. So typically you'll see a lot of AHRIs at this stage, level 7, around level 7-ish to level 9. Start to play more so for 2v2s, shoving, not interacting with their opponent, looking for kind of Qs on the waves, and looking to, I guess, play for river control, sweep out of vision, potentially even roam, back up their team. Now, that doesn't mean you can't play for trades and you can't play for solo kills and things like that. Obviously, it's case-by-case basis, and League is a game of specifics. But holistically, there's kind of this phase where 1 to 6, there's AHRI, then 6 to 9 is a different phase of AHRI, and then level 9 onwards, you're typically just playing for shove and move, not interacting in the lane really at all, playing more so for the map. So these are kind of like the 3 phases of the lane phase. I guess to kind of give you guys an idea of like big picture, what AHRI is trying to achieve. Let's dive into the 3 differing types of lane matchups. So this first one is Faker playing AHRI versus Yone. Faker, a very, very, very good AHRI player, very, very consistent. Now, typically what you'll see in a lot of the low range matchups, whether it's Yone, whether it's a Fizz, whether it's a Kiana, even a Kali, you'll see the AHRI typically slow build, whether it's a 2-stack or a 3-stack, typically really focusing auto W autos, proc those electrocute whenever you can, looking for nice little short trades, getting the minion advantage, typically getting level 2 first, and really trying to bully the opponent under tower. You got to be a little bit careful employing this strategy because it does mean you're a lot more vulnerable to ganks because you are actively shoving up. What you'll also see is a lot of reactive E usage, not as much proactively E usage, because again, if you hold your E quite reactively, then the enemy won't really have many trading opportunities onto you. You'll typically only see E proactively used when there is basically no trading opportunity on the enemy and we already know where the enemy jungler is. So as you can see, notice how Faker's posturing very aggressively here, past the wave, got that level 2 first, got a beautiful little stack going on here. And this is exactly what you'll see into a lot of these sorts of matchups. A lot of people struggle into Yone, hence why I wanted to kind of highlight the Yone matchup. He ends up going E level 2 just to maybe to thwart off any potential EQ trades level 2 from the Yone. As you can see here, gets a nice little ward on the Raptors and is able to posture up very aggressive. And as you can see, very, very solid auto W so far. Always looking to proc that electrocute on cooldown. One thing you'll see as well is that Qs are used quite conservatively because you don't want to run yourself too Nice auto W again, proccing that Scorch as well on cooldown, making sure getting max value from that Scorch. He's also got a very aggressive setup, so again, tying back to having that synergy between items, play style, and runes. He's playing the lane quite fast, quite aggressive. He's also got C-Pot, and he's got Scorch and Mana Flow secondary with Electrocute. So as you can see, there is alignment between those 3 pillars of the lane right there. Keeping his tether, beautiful auto Ws, always going in and out of range, making sure he's proccing that electrocute off cooldown. Again, continuing to slow build waves and harass and keep this guy pinned in lane. You can do a bit of a stack and bounce the wave on your side if you're versing a very, I guess, someone that doesn't have as much sustain as a Yone. Yone has typically secondary resolve and the D shield, so bouncing wouldn't really be that wise. If you're playing into a Fizz or Kiana, you can oftentimes bounce. Again, looking for nice little short trades there, proccing that electrocute. Here, he's not able to get the Q1, Q2. Typically, you would see a lot more holding of the Q and kind of use it as like a large, like kind of timing it with last hits so you can kind of get that instant Q1, Q2. But it looks like in this instance, he was just using it for the Q1 and then kind of complementing that with a W and auto. But notice how, again, very conservative with ease, not rushing abilities too much. Goes for a nice little Q1 there on the edge, but forces out the E from the Yone. But again, constantly getting the minion advantage, posturing up nice and aggressively. Beautiful Q1, Q2 there. This is what this is all about. Again, I just want to kind of highlight this Q. Beautiful, that range clip, the Q1, Q2. They're the Qs we want to be looking for. Posturing up nice and aggressively. Another little W there, proccing that Scorch. Excuse me. Silas shows him bot river. Looks like Yone probably going for another, potentially a reset here. So it looks like he's shoving in, probably going to go for a reset of his own. He's got TP here, so no stress. Yep. Resets, comes back, working towards that lost chapter. Yone's gone for an early D-Blade, which is interesting. Beautiful Q1, Q2 there. Ends up missing the charm, so Yone's able to look for a little bit of a trade on the back end. So not amazing from Faker there, but ends up getting out of dodge. He's got a great ward on bot side here. Ends up missing that Q. You will see, in my opinion, from watching a lot of these higher level AHRI players, Chovy seems, oh, bit of a misclick there. Chovy seems to be definitively the best AHRI, and I think his Qs are by far the most accurate. So if you are curious about watching a lot of other AHRI players, Chovy would be the one to watch, in my opinion. He's by far the best. But notice how, again, rinse, repeat. Not kind of queuing the wave all that much. Really focus on slow building waves, aggressive posturing, walking past the wave. Very aggressive E. This is very uncharacteristic of a lot of, the way you play these melee matchups. It's very rare that you're going to use your E aggressively like this because it typically leads to trading windows on the enemy's behalf. So that's quite rare. Typically you don't see that as much. More also you would see those reactive E's. Again, beautiful tethering, getting in and out of combat. Beautiful Q on the back end there. Getting the clip of the Q1, Q2 there. But still very much creating that minion advantage. Staying out of that Q range, repositioning quite nicely with the W, utilizing that move speed. Notice how rinse repeat with the waves. Slow build, stack, harass, slow build, stack, harass, keeping yourself safe from ganks. He seems to have a pretty good idea about where the jungler is, thanks to those wards on the Raptors and wards on the bot side there as well. If you don't feel safe to shove, you can always hold the wave neutral. That's also completely fine to a lot of melee matchups. Holding the wave neutral gives you a lot of flexibility that way as well. So as you can see, rinse, repeat here. Now, Yone did a really good job of using R for lane control. This is what you'll see in a lot of melee matchups, what they'll try to do. So typically, if you're versing a Silas, if you're versing an Akali, if you're versing a Fizz, rather than kind of slowly bleeding out and losing, they'll use their R aggressively for lane control. So that, guys, that's something you need to be actively thinking about or at least factoring in when versing these low range matchups. And that's basically it. Now he's got this first blood, all's good from now. So the main points I wanted to get across here were, number one, the significance of holding charm more so reactively, being very patient with charms. Number two, consistently looking for those Q1, Q2s, those at the kind of the tip of the Q there. These weren't amazing from Faker this game, but he made up for it with beautiful slow building and stacking of waves, aggressive posturing, good quality, leaning and warding, and beautiful W uses to tether out Yone's Qs and proccing the Scorch and Electrocute on cooldown. Things that you can look for in your own matchups when you're versing low range matchups like Yone. So now we're on to the mid-range matchups, right? These are the champs like Talia, Annie, like a lot of these, not super high range, but not super low range. This can be a little bit tricky depending on the matchup itself. Annie is actually quite a difficult matchup for AHRI. AHRI is very squishy, hence why in this game, Chovy ended up going bone plating Overgrowth as well as C-Pot and played the lane very fast. Typically, there are two overarching strategies into these mid-range matchups. You can play them very fast with C-Pot, kind of using offense as defense, looking for quite often tempo resets, or you can play it quite slow, go scaling runes, and then play for Dorans, and be a little bit more conservative, even scale all the way to Lost Chapter on your first recall. So I'm actually going to show you Chovy playing the fast approach, and then I'll show a VOD of me playing the slower approach into a Varus mid. So we're just going to go over the key points here. This Annie was actually very creative. He actually started E, which you don't really see that often. You can see that he was trying to go for the W auto to proc the Electrocute, but with the movement speed from the Annie there, thwarted that one off pretty nicely. So yeah, Chovy in this game goes for a very fast pace approach. You'll see him go for a lot of high value Qs, trying to make Annie react to waves. This is a very high skill cap way of playing AHRI. You can still see he's trying to get in range and clip the Annie there with some Ws. Doesn't quite work, but you can see he's actively trying to get that minion advantage. Annie's doing a very good job of actually auto attacking the AHRI while the AHRI was focusing on the wave. Chovy does a beautiful auto W there on the back end to fish for a nice little trade. Unfortunately, can't proc the Electro though. Now he gets to level 2 first. Fishes up aggressively for an excellent auto. Look at this trade here. This is unbelievable. This is so hard to do. So he walks up, auto W, and look at the accuracy of that Q perfectly on the end and able to proc that Electrocute. Very, very high level. And this is what makes Chovy, in my opinion, one of the best RIs to watch. His Q accuracy is out of this world. So he has the minute advantage here. This is a very interesting way of playing the matchup. I actually haven't played the matchup like this. He's playing it very fast, aggressively. I think the bone plating is helping him do this without taking too much damage. Again, looking for a lot of those Ws every now and then. High value Qs here, trying to shove the wave in, make Annie react. Already, you can tell he's burning through a lot of his resources. You can probably see he's going to go for an earlier recall. This is actually quite a hard setup to pull off as well, or a strategy to pull off, because you're quite vulnerable to ganks. Notice how he hasn't even put our ward out right now. He's just hoping that maybe Graves paths onto the top side and is spotted by the Kindred ward. So this is typically, yeah, very high skill cap way of playing. Graves goes for the level 3 gank. Looks like he trades flash for flash with Yanni. So not an amazing outcome. So it wouldn't surprise me if he recalls. Lovely. Now notice again, we're seeing that synergy between playstyle, runes, and itemization. He's got the aggressive lane-centric runes. He's got a very aggressive playstyle, and he's got the itemization with the early Dorans and the Seapot to back it up. Again, the 3 pillars of having a good quality lane phase, having synergy between those 3 core pillars. Comes back. Wouldn't surprise me if he continues to play this nice and fast and aggressively. Bit of an average Q there from Chovy, a little bit uncharacteristic. As you can see, Annie is using that E beautifully to kind of win those auto W trades from the AHRI. So props to this Annie, playing it very nicely, looking for high value Qs yet again. Seems like what he's trying to do is attack the low wave clear of the Annie. He ends up going early sweeper. This is something that Chovy does quite often. He does this when he's kind of trying to set up ganks and kind of use offense as defense strategy. I don't really recommend this for beginners. It's quite a high level thing. I would stick to Vision Trinket. I wouldn't really swap until maybe level 7 personally if I'm playing AHRI. Unless you have incredibly good threat assessment. Tethers out quite nicely. Again, walks up, goes for a W, tries to land the Q to proc the electrocute, doesn't quite land it. As you can see, more than willing to trade some resources for the wave here. Another nice high value Q. Recognizes that he's not going to get the Q1, Q2 because Annie's using that E reactively, as you can see back here. Annie's just walking up, Qing, and then using the E movement speed to dodge to the side. But as a result, because she has the C-pot, she's got the more resources to work with, and she's playing a fast-paced lane, this Annie is struggling to keep up in the mana department. So Chovy's done a really great job of kind of using, again, this is a classic, using offense as defense strategy, playing very, very fast, and probably going for very common tempo resets. Now, because the jungler shared XP before with the Annie, he's got the level 6 first. We'll kind of walk up, see what he does here with his trading pattern. Walks up. Looks for a W to get in range and look for an excellent Q. Look at this usage of the W. Not going for a max range Q, utilizing the W first to get in range, and then an excellent W on the back end, Q on the back end to proc that electrocute. Excellent trade here. Now this, look at this, guys. He has that charm. He's overwhelming the mental stack of the Annie. And by walking up and pressuring the Annie like this, the Annie is actually missing farm. So take a look at this. The Annie knows that the charm is ready to go. He was just zoning. He's not using it, just zoning. The Annie ends up missing 2 melees from just holding that charm. So this is why patience is key. Charm usage is 2 parts. There's the usage of, or the actual value of the charm itself, the taunt itself, but then there's also the threat of the taunt itself. Both of them are very relevant when you're playing AHRI. You can't just get in the habit of rushing E. So that seems to be a very common trend when you're watching very good quality AHRIs, is they hold that charm more so reactively if they don't have high percentage chance of hitting it. Now, the enemy users are proactively to relieve a little bit of pressure because she's getting kind of shit on right now in the 1v1. Maybe to go look for some sort of a tempo reset, which makes sense. So I'm assuming she catches this wave and then resets. Pretty straightforward. Now she's at level 7. Now she's got Lost Chapter. Why Lost Chapter and not Lucidity? Because this is a very shove and wave-oriented way of playing the game, right? You're not really roaming in this style, right? She's playing more so for shove, using offense as defense, which requires a lot of mana and AP. Lost Chapter, the benefit of Lost Chapter over Lucidity is it's obviously more damage to the wave because you've got AP and more mana, which allows you to kind of spam Q on the wave. So just take a look at this trade here in a second. So walks up, auto, W, uses the bone plating to kind of win that trade, and then lands the Q on the back end to proc the electro. Very, very good trading patterns here. So what you'll see, again, this is kind of like the reason I wanted to show this for this is a great encapsulation, or just a great VOD encapsulating what it's like to play a lane relatively fast-paced in one of these more mid-rangey matchups that a lot of people struggle with. Trades are for flash. Now we're approaching, 8 minutes into the game. Got complete control over the lane. Fishing for opportunistic trades here. Annie's kind of using aggressively, which it is what it is. Pretty straightforward. I think we've got the major points. And now you can play for river control, play to complement your jungler. Let's complement this with a much more slower scaling style. So this is me playing the slower scaling style. Now, in hindsight, I don't think the scaling style was really even the most optimal choice, because I feel like I could actually play this with C-Pot, play it with Electro, even secondary bone plating, and get a lot more done into this Varus. I just decided, for whatever reason, to play more scaling. Maybe because I think I saw they had quite tanky members with the Nasus top, and I wanted that first strike scaling into the mid game. But if you are planning to take scaling runes, as you can see here, I've got First Strike, I've got Magical Footwear, I've got Transcendence, very, very scaling. Typically, you want to be more conservative with your wave states, being more focused on holding the wave in neutral state, not trying to overshove. If they do give you the shove, you can take it as long as you're getting good quality wards out and not dying to ganks. But for the most part, focusing on landing those Q1, Q2s whenever possible, getting into range with your W, making the enemy make a choice between you and the wave like I'm doing here, so Varus can't go for high value Qs. And you'll see in a second, I think I landed a nice little Q around here somewhere. Beautiful Q, Q1, Q2, timed with that last hit. Exactly what you want to be looking to do, tying back to the ability usage tips from before. So as you can see, this is a lot easier to execute style, more patient, more poised. Again, I would recommend you play with a wide variety of these early lane strategies to feel what's good for you in your elo bracket. If you want to play more scaling oriented, give that a go. If it's not working, maybe speed it up a little bit with C-Pod, Electrocute. And over time, you'll find what works for you. Again, trying to time my Qs with last hits there, pretty straightforward, holding relatively conservative wave states. I actually got a nice little slow build here. And as a result, this guy greeted. I'm able to land a nice little trade on the back end there. Got some beautiful vision. And as you can see, very straightforward. This guy's not pressuring me that much. Looking for high value Qs whenever possible. Holding my W more so reactively to avoid skill shots. Pretty straightforward here. So as you can see, very good juxtaposition between the two styles. Let's move on to the final style of matchup that you're going to face. So now for the high range matchups, so this is the Victor, the Syndra, the AHRI, even the Xerath and Lux and stuff like that. These are quite hard matchups for AHRI. What I love about this VOD is that this was a very competent Victor, and Veigar gets shit on, and that's exactly how it should go. You should get shit on in the early game. And what Faker does a really, really great job of this game is minimize with good quality tempo resets, which is the aim of the game playing AHRI into one of these matchups. Relax, focus on your CS, allow yourself to kind of get shoved in. Try not to take too much damage. I'm not a massive fan of some of these early trades. I think he took too much damage from those Q orders from the Victor. But as you'll see, as he's getting shit on, which is exactly how most AHRI into Victor should go, he is able to still focus on his farm, trade HP for farm, but just come back with TP. So as you can see here, Victor's doing a really good job of poking, slow building, harassing. So if I want to skim through this, you'll get the point. Victor is continuously posturing aggressively, landing a lot of nice E's here. Faker's really struggling. He's only got one C-Pot left, so you'll see that he's really trying to time his bases with the amount of resources that he has. He CS's under tower immaculately, getting majority of this farm. Keeping his distance whenever possible, using D-mats creatively to help CS minions that he can't really get. Beautiful CSing here. This absolute masterclass in CSing. Now he's getting quite low. Insta resets, bases with TP, comes back for tier 1 boost to give him move speed to help him avoid some of those skill shots, pulls the wave, freezes, gets a nice quality ward again. Now comes back. Now the rinse repeat. He actually shoves out a little bit, uses DMAT to help him get the shove out. Again, you see he's got a massive focus on the wave rather than trying to kill the Victor because he's not going to be able to win trades into the Victor. He knows he can't win trades into the Victor. So he's again minimizing and with his intention to basically get to his level 6, get to his major power spikes, and then he can actually play for 2v2s with his jungler later on. Comes back. Notice how he's already very low on C-Pot stack. So what does he do? Cleans up some of these melees, recognizes that the wave after is a cannon, instantaneously recalls on the cannon wave. Beautiful fundamentals here. Understanding that the Victor can't get that wave in time, bases on the cannon, and neutralizes a lot of that work that the Victor had done. Gets lucidity, comes back, doesn't even miss barely any CS because he based on the cannon wave perfectly. And notice how he's 50 CS by 6 minutes. 56 CS by, it's basically the exact same CS as the Victor. That is the aim of the game when you're versing one of these counter matchups. If you're not getting pressure relief from your jungler, and your jungler hasn't been coming mid like this Viego, you're left to your own devices, you're forced to use TP, base on cannons, do what you need to do, trade HP for the wave, keep your farm as high as possible. Use your W reactively to avoid skill shots whenever you see fit. Keep your distance, proc your mana flow if you are taking mana flow from a distance. You get the picture. And he did a really, really great job of rinse, repeat, farming, scaling, basing on cannons, rinse, repeat. So don't feel bad if your games look like this, right? You're getting shoved in, you're not really having much impact. That's why Victor is an absolutely nasty matchup if played well. So hopefully this gives you a very good holistic view of how to play roughly the 3 types of matchups. So we've been talking a lot about each of the 3 mythics and how each of these mythics alter your champion's identity and I guess your role in a composition. So what I'm going to do is share with you tips regarding skirmishing and mindset for each of the 3 mythics so that when you guys go into game, you have an idea of how you need to be thinking. Now we're going to go ahead and start by talking about Ludens, and the mythic we're going to talk about is going to be represented by whatever is in the top right corner. So the mindset when you're going Ludens is you're looking for 100 to 0 picks. You're more of a hardcore assassin. So you're looking for split targets. So this is a great example. I see a split Kai'Sa mid here, sitting off to the side, and I'm trying to go for those 100 to 0s, picking off like any other assassin would. Plays a lot like a Zed or something like that, or a Fizz. Flanks and coming from the side are all very important. Utilizing Fog of War to kind of pick people off when they least expect it. You need to be really thinking like a hardcore assassin. Things like Sweeper are going to be very important, kind of sitting around the edges like this, looking for those angles where you can get yourself in a position where they're moving somewhere and you can kind of pick those squishy targets. This is exactly the mindset that you want to have when you're playing Ludens AHRI. One thing that I would recommend is being patient, really emphasizing your positioning. When you're playing mid-game with this setup, you really need to be thinking about not only where they are now, but where they're going to be. Neutral objectives are your best friend because you can use them as magnets to kind of get yourself into a nice little position. Here, for example, I knew they were going to try and play for Baron control, so I'm able to kind of sit off to the side and get myself a nice little pick here. I didn't even need to R there. I don't know why the hell I R'd, but you get the point. You know, this setup is a little less forgiving, and the reason why is that with Everfrost, you don't have to have amazing charm accuracy, because if someone, say, walks through this choke point here, I can start with Everfrost. Even if I don't hit the root itself, at least they're going to get slowed, and that's going to make it a lot easier for me to land my charm. So the thing with this setup is because you have less utility, you're kind of incentivized to actually land your abilities very accurately. Hence why Fog of War is so important. In this case, they didn't really know where I was, but they knew where my team was. And here I end up missing my charm. Because I miss my charm, we literally lose the game off this one pick. If I one-shot the Lee Sin as we walk through here, because they can chain CC, we win the game. But I miss, and now we have nothing. Now I'm a burst-oriented champion that can't land the rest of their damage because they're not CC'd, and now we end up just losing the fight. So it is less forgiving in that sense. So it does give you a clearer identity, right? That's the benefit of Ludens, gives you a very clear identity, but it is, in a weird way, less forgiving. Here's a great example of using neutral objectives as a magnet. In this case, this was Ajax here, camping around the next objective, and he's able to kind of make a pick before the next objective. This is exactly how you need to be thinking. Be on the lookout for mispositioning. If the enemy mispositions, look to go, 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 utilizing that Fog of War. If they misstep, you need to be there, ready to go. This is a great example. Sees the Nunu out of position, instantaneously go, and then we can kind of make that pick, get the ball rolling. So overall, if you feel like you prefer the assassin style, great, but really make sure you're emphasizing positioning. You don't really want to be in front-to-back scenarios. You want to be really utilizing Fog of War because you don't have the benefit or the luxury of using Everfrost to secure your charms. Very important. Now, Everfrost, moving on to Everfrost. A lot of people struggle with Everfrost because it's a much more flexible way of playing the champion. You can dive, you can peel, you can scrap, you can do many, many different things. The premise is don't get too caught up in fighting a particular way. You've got to be ready to adapt to whatever you're paired with, right? Sometimes you're going to be peeling a Fed 80 carry. Sometimes you're going to be complementing a carry-oriented jungler just like this. But typically, this is how you want to be fighting, going in with your Everfrost, following it up with your Charm, and then kind of going with it. If it doesn't feel good for you, don't force it. But, you know, I would highly recommend playing around with it at some point. And this is typically what you want to do. Even if you miss it, look at that. Even if I actually missed my Everfrost here, but I still clip with the slow. And as a result, I'm able to land that charm very easily. And as you can see, it pairs beautifully with First Strike and allows me to land the rest of my abilities. So notice what I said here. Everfrost is actually the easiest to execute Mythic once you get comfortable with the Mythic itself. A lot of people who don't build Everfrost get really overwhelmed with using another active and having another keybind. Once you build the feeling of Everfrost and build that muscle memory of actually utilizing Everfrost, it's actually significantly easier to execute than Ludens for the reasons I mentioned before. It actually makes hitting a lot of your skill shots significantly easier. So, yeah, it allows for a lot of extended fights, gives you a little bit of durability, and take your time to feel it out. A lot of people kind of panic and they feel like, oh my god, if I don't get it now, I'm never going to get it. No, it does take time. You can get creative. As you can see here, I end up using it to kind of chain CC with my Charm, and it allows me to learn my full combo to get a lot of gold and value from my First Strike. Think of Everfrost as a way to get out any key mobility spell. So here, if I was building Ludens, I wouldn't have the luxury of using Everfrost first, right? So what would happen is that I would be able to RE, he would then flash my E, and then I wouldn't have anything. Here, I can Everfrost, burn the flash, and then I can follow with my RE after, right? That's one of the huge benefits of Everfrost. It actually massively changes the way your champion navigates in skirmishes, hence why you see it so commonly in those high elo games, because most of the champions you get to play in a high elo have mobility, so having that extra sense of lockdown is very, very important. And like I said here, Everfrost is more forgiving because you were less tied to your E. This is a great example. He basically already killed the Vex without even having to land the E. Patience is key with AHRI regardless of Mythic. You need to be utilizing your terrain scaling to your advantage. Play around the edges. And this is a great example of a classic chaotic skirmish with AHRI, playing around the edges, in and out, utilizing terrain scaling to clean up kills. So I'll kind of play this skirmish one more time. So here, playing with my support, he kind of gets caught out. I Everfrost, I've chain CC with the Charm, land my full combo, get that Everfrost gold, that First Strike gold, keeping at max range, looking for Q1, Q2s, repositioning, always standing near the edges so I can terrain scale, fade away Q for AoE Q1, Q2, in and out. This is the name of the game with AHRI. And this Everfrost allows you to be very flexible with the way you skirmish. If I was Ludens and say I didn't have enough and I'm on Fog, it'd be a lot harder for me to do my damage. But here, you know, Ludens probably would have been okay as well because I was on Fog and I probably would have landed that charm regardless, but you get the point. But Everfrost gives me that flexibility. I'm not afraid to go in a little bit more and take a bit of damage because I got that durability as well. Now, we'll move on to Liandry's. Liandry's is very uncomfortable for a lot of people because it's less upfront damage. It's more about front to back. Now, Liandry's is a 2-3 item scaling mythic, right? So you need typically a Shadow Flame or a Void Staff or a Death Cap or whatever it might be to complement Liandry's. Typically, Liandry's by itself isn't overly amazing. You need time, you need levels, you need items. But if you're versing a very, very tanky composition, or you've got low damage on your comp. So in this situation, we had like kind of like a double tank. I'm not going to be bursting anyone. There was very little early game skirmishes because I had an Udyr who's a farm-oriented jungler. I'm not going to get much value out of my Everfrost. I might as well just go Liandry's scale into the mid game. As you can see here, even if I miss a lot of my, if I miss my charm in this situation or he dodges it, I don't mind because my damage isn't coming from my burst. I can move around the fight, peel for my team, and just really mow people down. It's a really great way to deal with these tankier members. And patience is key in fights with these setups. Don't panic. You don't need to dive into the backline and do anything crazy. And like I said before, it can be uncomfortable because you have a lot less upfront damage, but your sustained damage in your fight, especially with the amount of ability haste you're getting, you know, you go in and out with your W AoE and your R AoE and get a lot of bulk damage. You are the carry if you opt in for this setup because you have less utility and you need a lot more gold. So here is a little bit of a fast forward of what the mid game would typically look like with Liandry's. I'm less focused on making picks out of Fog of War. I'm more focused on keeping up my farm, trying to stay 10 CS per minute and doing a lot more side laning. So here I'm just catching sides. I'm happy to TP in late to a play. I'm less trying to be that assassin that's hovering out of fog looking for those picks. I'm just clearing vision, shoving and moving, continuously going back to the side lane, keeping up my farm, keeping that 10 CS per minute. Last thing I will note here, be careful about using Liandry's as a crutch. What I saw actually ages ago in the MLA when I was recommending AHRI is that people were defaulting to Liandry's even in games where there weren't a lot of tanks. So they would just see one tank and be like, I gotta go Liandry's. And why this was the case is because it's actually kind of more forgiving. Like you can miss your E, you can actually only hit one part of your Q, but you'll still do a lot of damage in a team fight because you've got your W AoE, your R AoE, and it's got more overall sustained damage. And so what you'll find is a lot of people who are struggling with Q accuracy and E accuracy would be like, well, I'm missing all my abilities, therefore I feel pretty useless with my Ludens. Therefore, I'm just going to go Liandry's and do a lot of damage. And I myself even fell down this hole when I was starting to learn AHRI. So be careful of this. It might feel good for some people, but be careful. Some people have used it in the past as a crutch for poor skill shot accuracy. So one of the most common problems with AHRI is, I guess, not really understanding what your role is within a team composition. Ever since AHRI has kind of developed this very flexible nature and flexible role, a lot of my lower elo clients especially be like, well, what do I do in a game? Like, what should I be thinking? How should I be thinking? I tried to solve that before with the emphasis on the mythic and how that kind of shapes your identity. But even from like a win condition perspective, you can be the carry sometimes. You can be a secondary carry or you can purely be a facilitator. It depends on what you want to be. Our job as an AHRI player is to be open to a wide variety of possibilities. Some games you're going to fill the shoes of a facilitator. Some games you're going to fill the shoes of a carry. You need to be open to being a little bit of everything. We don't have the comfort of defaulting to, oh, I am playing Azir and I am the main carry every single game. We don't have that luxury, right? So what we're going to do is go through a few screenshots. Okay, so here's an example of a very versatile game set. So we've got the AHRI here. And why is this versatile? Well, I've got plenty of other strong skirmishers. I've got a 7-3 Riven. I've got a relatively strong Jarvan. I've got a relatively strong Twitch Lulu. In a game like this, as an AHRI, the world's my oyster. I can potentially peel Twitch if they get a great engage. I can full up engage on my Jarvan and Riven and play dive oriented there. It depends on how the fight pans out. So in a game like this, I can be very versatile. I don't need to be tunneled into a very kind of structured way of playing the game. And this is why I love AHRI for solo queue, because if I am in a game like this where I've got multiple fed carries and this is what I would call kind of like a skirmish oriented composition, I can fill that role really easy. I can adapt to however the fights play out. I can be there to complement Jarvan Riven. I can be there to peel the Lissandra Belveth and Jax off of my Twitch Lulu. I can do many things as an AHRI with my charm and things like that and my mobility. Then you're going to have games like this that are less versatile, right? So in this game as AHRI, I have a pretty behind bot lane, right? I've got a 4 and 7 MF just getting destroyed here, so she's not really a win condition. You know, top is questionable. I mean, doing okay in farm, but I don't know how amazing Olaf's going to be in this game. I would say I've got some options on top side, but definitely no options on bot side. So now I probably want to be more focused around my Kayn and my Olaf rather than my MF and my Karma. So I've got some direction in who I want to be directing attention towards and probably skirmishing with my Kayn and my Olaf. Being less so focused on peel, me being, I would say, a core secondary carry to the Kayn and the Olaf. So notice how in this game I've got a little bit less options, but I still can be quite versatile. There's still a little bit of versatility here in what I can do. So I'm a carry / secondary carry in a game like this. And then you've got pure facilitator games, right? So in this game, I am, doing okay in farm, 0-0-3. I've got very clear carry with my Ezreal 4-1, very clear carry here with the Shaco. All I need to do is just complement and facilitate my Ezreal and my Shaco, and I am, in this case, basically a pure facilitator. I am not the main carry by any means. And then you have very, very hard games where you've kind of got no secondary win cons. My bot lane's losing, my top lane's losing, my jungle's behind, and it's not going to scale amazingly. And games like this, I'm basically screwed, and I kind of have to try and take on the role of a carry, which can be very hard in games like this, especially when I'm versing multi-thread and a lot of dive and lockdown. But the way I want you guys to always be thinking when you're playing AHRI is be ready to adapt. But more importantly, think about who are the strong members on your team and who do you want to be playing around. Now, be open to the idea of peeling a fed carry. Be open to the idea of complementing other divers on your team. This versatility is key to AHRI, having success in solo queue with AHRI. So now for some mid-game tips. Your R cooldown is your baby. Everything on AHRI revolves around your R. For me, and what I would recommend for a lot of beginner AHRI players, even intermediate or even advanced AHRI players, if you don't have R, you should be second guessing, triple guessing, quadruple guessing your ability to do something. If I don't have R, my mindset is typically give. I don't want to fight. I don't want to fight. I don't want to fight. I am very obsessed with my R cooldown. AHRI without R is a shell of a champion. Hence why in high elos, when you verse very competent laners, what they'll do is they'll try and trade R for R with you in lane. And they'll basically neutralize the AHRI by trading R for R. If you watch any good Akali player, they're going to R aggressively onto the AHRI and trade R for R and basically neutralize the AHRI like that. This is a very common way of neutralizing AHRI. So this is your number one reference point alongside your itemization and all that stuff with AHRI. Lull states your best friend. The more you are, the more aware you are, of your teammate's location, I would say specifically your jungler, the more opportunities you will see. AHRI is fundamentally a 2v2 oriented, skirmish oriented champion, right? 2v2 skirmish oriented champion. If you are not aware of your jungler's location, if you're not aware what your jungler is doing, you're going to have very little idea of where to be, what to do, and you're going to be overwhelmed. So these are great reference points. Where is my jungler or my strong members? What are they doing? Where are they on the map? And do I have R? Right? Very important reference points. Sweeper is your best friend, especially levels 7 to 9 when you're getting those wave clear breakpoints and you're starting to shove and move. This is where Sweeper really comes into play. So I would say AHRI more often than not, due to her very advanced mobility, you're not as vulnerable to ganks post 6. You're not as reliant on your normal vision trinket, and you can swap to Sweeper relatively early. Never underestimate the significance of AHRI's go buttons. What you'll see, a common mistake in mid-game, is people overemphasize going to the side lane and underemphasize AHRI's ability to ditch a side wave and just go and make a play happen mid. Rather than talk about it, I'm going to show you what this looks like specifically with a client's mistake. So as you can see here, AHRI is shoving out bot side. So they're in kind of like a 1-3-1 scenario here, right? They've got Malphite on top. They've got AHRI on bot here. They've kind of got like this 1-3-1 going on. But you'll see in a second, there's a lot of action, a lot of aggressive posturing going on. And you'll also see that the Malphites come from top side to collapse on mid. This would be a beautiful pincer moment. And because they're posturing so aggressively, we have R, we have our Everforce. You know, we're really strong. We're 9-3. This is our ability to go. We're level 11. This is AHRI's go time. But what do? This client shoves out, tries to value farm, be hyper efficient, and then as a result, the player is highly likely going to be over by the time she gets there. She walks over, but by the time she gets there, Malphite's already collapsed, the team's already died, and the play is literally already over by the time she gets there. So, you know, what I would recommend playing around with a lot in mid-game is simply, you know, don't be too obsessed with mid-game efficiency, right? AHRI can get a lot of shit done, especially when you're running this Everfrost and R build. Even with Ludens, to be honest, utilizing Fog of War to get shit done is very, very important. So play around with this concept, guys. So here are some other big AHRI tips. Generally at level 9, AHRI Q will one-shot the backline casters anyway, but it is possible to one-shot the backline at level 7 if you take DMAT and use 2 DMATs on casters and have at least 80 to 90 AP, like I've mentioned in the VOD so far. Pretend you scale. This is actually one of my biggest tips. This is what helped me the most. A lot of people get caught up in this idea that AHRI doesn't scale, and the only reason they perceive AHRI as not scaling is because they're not farming well. You need to know what it feels like to farm 9 CS per minute and get to like your first mythic and tier 2 boots with 9 CS per minute. You need to know what that feels like without dying, essentially. So yes, some games objectively you're not going to scale. It's not like you're a Kale or something, but you need to know what it feels like to pretend you scale. Right? So then later on, when you start ditching waves and roaming and doing all this stuff, you're going to know what you're missing out on. You're going to know what you're sacrificing. I cannot stress the significance of this enough. Hence why you see, by the way, all the best players that have success with AHRI have incredibly high CS numbers. And make sure you're getting max value from your R. There's a lot of information in each and every R. If you don't even know where to start in your reviews when you're looking at your AHRI gameplay, go to each and every one of your R usages. There's a lot of information in your Rs, whether it be a roam, a skirmish, maybe you're using it defensively, which is actually a huge red flag. If you are using R defensively to escape a gank or something like that, then that's something you need to review. So a good little tidbit is make sure you're getting max value from each R usage. That's something you should be considering in your post-game review. And do not use pro, play, build, and style to dictate how you play solo queue. A lot of you are going to see AHRI highly likely at MSI. A lot of them are probably going to take Unsealed Spellbook. Don't fall down that rabbit hole, guys. Pro play is very different to solo queue. Very important heads up. Now for the infamous controversial matchup tier list with AHRI. So starting from the top, we have easy, slightly favorable, moving down into nasty matchups. This is in me and Ajax's experience. You got to play around and feel what's difficult for you and your rank and your server. This is a good solid framework. Some of these could be moving in between these, but for the most part, this is incredibly accurate in my experience. So if you have any questions, let me know about this. Pause it and look it over in your own time. Things to look out for in draft. There's 3 main areas. Multi-threat. AHRI loves multi-threat. If you see on your team you have a Kha'Zix, you have a Nocturne, you have a Camille, I love playing AHRI because multi-threat, multiple dive-oriented champions together lead to a lot of success in solo queue. So I love playing AHRI when I have multiple dive champs because I can complement their dive. Nocturne goes in, I go in, or Camille goes in and I go in, or even better, Camille and Nocturne go in and I go in. You get the point. Damage and CC split. Typically, I don't want to be on comps with too much CC when I'm playing AHRI. I hate playing with Ashes and stuff like that because it just feels like they're going to get too much value from Cleanse and QSSs and Mikhails and things like that. So I personally hate it. Something to look out for though, not a massively big deal. And then damage split. Obviously, you don't want to be pairing yourself with too many AP junglers because MRs can be incredibly effective. And the third one is lockdown. AHRI hates lockdown. Champs like Lissandra, Annie, Leona, Poppy, Vi, these lockdown champions, especially when there's multiple of them in a given composition. If I see Lissandra plus Vi, and with a Poppy top and a Leona support, get me the hell out of the game. I don't want to be in that game. Something to keep in mind. And in games like that, by the way, they're the ones you need cleanse. Therefore, you would need to take Unsealed Spellbook. Now, these are my top tips for learning AHRI. Number 1, first like I said before, feel out what it's like to play AHRI with an 8 or 9 CS per minute. Pretend you scale. Do not adopt the dominate your opponent mindset until way later. Sure, yes, play around with your trading patterns and those high value Qs and the Q1, Q2s, like getting the edge on the tip of the Q and proccing the Scorch with a W and things like that. But you won't know what you're missing out on with your roams until you've played this slow, patient style. I would actually recommend starting with the basic Assassins and Luden style first and then expanding because it has the simplest reference points. You know exactly what I need to use Fog of War. I need to assassinate squishies. I need to focus on landing that charm, going for the one shot. It's a really simple way of playing AHRI. It's not necessarily the most effective, but it's a great starting point. And then you can expand out once you've developed that baseline mastery. And then third, never forget or underestimate the significance of simply landing your goddamn skill shots, guys. Don't overcomplicate it. If you're missing charms, you're missing basic cues, don't be scratching your head as to why you're not winning games of League of Legends, right? AHRI is kind of one of those champions that really requires good quality skill shot accuracy, hence why a lot of people default to Everfrost. So guys, if you're missing too many E's and Q's, you need to look at that. Are you timing it with last hits? Are your movements too linear? Are you not holding the ability and overwhelming the mental stack? Are you not coming from Fog of War? These are the sorts of things you need to be looking for. You'd be surprised at how many reviews I do. People bringing in an AHRI VOD and like, Curtis, I can't figure out why I'm losing. And that we go over the first 3 skirmishes and they're missing all of their charms. It's pretty self-explanatory, guys. So to end off this guide, I want to go through a full VOD of Chovy playing AHRI into Gragas, tying in all the concepts that we learned throughout this guide. The early lane trading, the focus on farm, awareness of jungle location, playing off your item spikes, playing off your R cooldown, all the stuff that we mentioned in this guide. Now, he actually ended up going for that first strike page that I mentioned in the rune section with the Scorch, mana flow in the secondary tree. He's versing a relatively tanky team composition here. So let's see how he approaches this. So it kind of gets shit on level 1 by the Gragas here. Looks like he was going to go for an auto W. W trade, but then gets caught off by the E star from the Gragas. So one thing I'm going to be looking for here is how is he going to be utilizing his Qs, and how is he going to be utilizing his W? So nice little auto W there. Got a nice little slow build going in. He is versing a low range matchup. Gragas isn't typically, a normal low range matchup, but again, it should theoretically be playing for shove and stacking if possible. Gets the level 2 first. Be interesting to see if he actually wards early and where he wards. If he does ward. Okay, so he's versing a Zac, ends up warding the Raptor Pit. Notice how he ends up holding his E and Q, not leveling up level 2 because he doesn't know if he might need his E for an emergency as Zac kind of pops around the corner or something like that. So very nice until he gets the ward down. Now he can level up his Q. Ends up missing the Q2, but gets a nice little auto W trade on the back end. Procs that first strike. Sees the Zac on the Raptors. Stands outside the wave and gets nailed. A little bit of a mistake there, but it's able to trade on the back end with a beautiful WQ. Notice how he's able to use that W movement speed to get in range to actually land the Q1, Q2. Again, another AHRI, very specific there. Ends up evening out that trade quite nicely. Now, he probably knows he's not going to kill the Gragas. So some of these lanes where you can't kill the enemy, right? And again, this is actually going to be the case majority of the time with AHRI. I would say 95% of the time, you're not going to be able to kill your lane opponent. When I play AHRI and I'm going this setup, all I'm doing is planning to farm my ass off, scale beautifully into the mid game, and then I can make up for the difference later on. And even if your job is to simply go even / just farm well, get pressure, not die. Nowadays, AHRI, you don't need to feel pressure to get shit done in the early game. The days are past where you need to kind of shove, and go, because you're getting outscaled. No. AHRI scales very, very well heading into the mid game. This is why I've been pushing the narrative of pretending you scale, even if you don't believe it. So, kind of looking over a few of these trades here, he's done a pretty good job of harassing under tower. Ends up using his E aggressively in this situation. So, very creative. Ends up proccing that first strike with the E auto W there. Nice little trade. So notice how he hasn't really got this guy into kill threat range, and he's not really planning on killing him. He's just taking good fundamental trades, looking for Q auto Ws, tries to reposition there with the W to land the Q2 on the back end. Not dying to ganks, keeping it nice and simple. I actually didn't see how he used his DMAT. When did he use his DMAT here? Okay, so he ends up using one on the melee. I've noticed that there are two kind of overarching strategies with DMATs. There's ones where you can get two on... I think 2 on casters and 1 on melee. Sometimes you just see people not use them on casters at all and just kind of use it for cannon waves. Something that you want to play around with, you might want to play around with if you do play AHRI. I personally use them on the casters. So here I'm assuming he demats the cannon. See what he does, unless he wants to use it for one of the casters. So Gragas ends up recalling. This is the Chovy special where he doesn't try to instantaneously match the recall. He wants to milk the amount of gold that he's going to get on his recall. And I'm assuming he wants maybe Lucidities on his first base. So he needs that 1050. Ends up proccing first strike again. Beautiful. Notice again, pretty stock standard trading patterns. Clipping the enemy with that Q1, Q2 right at the end there. You'll see again. Excellent. Nice little reactive W there, avoiding that Q with the movement speed. Very good movement. Again, notice how it's nothing fancy. It's just the basics and everything done very consistently. No random Qs, no random charms, not dying to ganks, keeping it very clean, neat, and tidy. Be interested to see if he goes Lost Chapter, Straight Rush here, or Lucidity. This might even be a matchup where you can go straight Lucidity because it seems kind of non-interactive and I don't think you're going to be roaming that much. We'll see how it goes though. Okay, looks like a good reset angle. Comes back, he goes straight Lost Chapter. So I think because he probably assumes this is a slower game, more lane-centric, he wants that wave clear to deal with, and Gragas also has pretty good wave clear. I mean, he wants that lane control rather than more so playing for skirmishes and 2v2s. He also has a scaling jungler. Ends up using the last DMAT on the cannon there. Let's take a look at this trade here in a second. So it goes for a high value Q, ends up landing the Q1, Q2, and the W there. So very, very nice trade there. Proccing that first strike, getting an extra 19 gold. So notice how it's just relentless. Shoving in waves, protecting yourself at all times. His farming is incredibly good right now. Gragas goes for a very aggressive R usage. Gragas is obviously getting a little bit fed up. Ends up getting nailed by that Q. So this is what I've noticed, and this is what's given me success in the games that I have success with AHRI, is, again, keeping that real massive emphasis on that farm. Until you know what it feels like to farm 10 CS or 9 CS with AHRI, you don't know what you're missing out on. So get some beautiful vision on one side. Again, utilizing the W movement speed to look for a nice little trade there. Okay. Playing very shove-oriented here. Uses R aggressively. Notice it knows that Gragas didn't have E immediately, so he couldn't immediately E out. Repositions the Q2 with the R on the end, and is able to get a nice little solo kill there. Look at that. Oh, so close. Very, very, very close. So let's take a look at this. So the signs for this, right, is that he knew that Gragas didn't have R. He also knew that Gragas didn't have E. Goes for, and Gragas was very overextended in the lane there. I thought that was actually going to be a solo kill, but it gets the heal on the end. Unfortunately, Zach comes through. But he's able to clip the Gragas on the end there. Cherry looks pretty happy with himself there. But you get the point. The same fundamentals exist. And because you've got to remember that if he were to get the kill in the end, he would get the R reset. He probably would be able to escape the Zach gank anyway. So I'm assuming that was his intention. He's probably thinking, well, even if Zach comes here, I should be able to get the kill and then R out. So a little bit unfortunate. You can see the intention. So comes back. Looks like he could be working towards the Andres, or he could be going towards Everfrost. He is versus quite a low range composition, so Everfrost would be completely fine. So that ganks him again. He's able to peel back pretty nicely, leaning onto his vision on top side. So good fundamentals there from Chovy. So now at this stage, typically level 8, level 9, you're not really interacting with the enemy as much. Typically, you fit your wave clear breakpoint. You're playing more so to shove, make the enemy react, get good vision, and then back up your jungler, play around neutrals, that sort of thing. Look for opportunistic roam windows. Notice again, farm really good. 80 CS by 9 minutes. Very, very solid. Gragas has no flash here. Gragas is actually quite hard to hit with a lot of these charms. You can see he's struggling to hit some of them. Hovering his jungle on the top side, knowing that his jungle is on the rift. Okay, so notice how he's able to, because he's leaning on the side, he's able to back up his team, and if a 2v2 happens, he's able to get there first. So very good awareness of his jungler's location. Again, talking about the significance of those lull states and miniature lull states to be aware of your jungler's location. Sees an opportunistic fight here. This is AHRI's domain, Skirmish City. Because he's in the right place at the right time, able to opportunistically back up his team. So, I'm assuming it cleans up the Renekton here. Takes it nice and easy. Beautiful charm. Lovely. Great. Shoves the wave out while he's here. Now he's got Everfrost. So this is where you're very, very strong. He's borderline 10 CS per minute. Got his Everfrost. He's got, in terms of the game that he's in, I mean, pretty solid holistic game. Bot seems to be doing okay. Jungle seems to be doing okay. Ad top's doing okay. This is one of these skirmish-oriented games where you have a lot of options. It's a very versatile game state. So keep that farm up. Notice how he's also got that sweeper here as well. Starts to place down some vision. Okay, ends up taking an okay trade. Clears a lot of wards with his sweeper here. Shove, shove, shove. Make Gragas react. Beautiful Q1 there. Q1, Q2. Gets out the Gragas ult. Okay. Dropped Rift. Doesn't have Everfrost here. Pinging the Gragas flash, I'm assuming. Beautiful chain CC. Pretty straightforward. So I'm assuming he shoved this out. Recalls come back. Looks like he's working towards a Banshee's second item here. Looks like he actually TP top opportunistically to try and help his team. Didn't end up working. Comes back mid. Again, check out that farm. Very, very solid. All you need to do is keep it neat and tidy. Don't die. Keep the farm up. Complement your jungler. If your jungler goes to Rift, go to Rift. If your jungler goes to Dragon, go to Dragon. Gragas is being a little bit of a nuisance here, but with the Verdant Barriers, not taking a mass amount of damage, especially with the durability with the Everfrost. Okay. Team back him up and hovering him. Can't really offer much in this situation because he doesn't have R. So typically you'll see very conservative behavior here, given that he doesn't have R. Doesn't compensate. Just leaves his team. Not much he can do about that. So doing a great job. Nearly got that mid tower. Tries to get the mid tower before the 14-minute mark. Now, this is typically the trading, the all-in combo that you will see, like I've been mentioning in the Everfrost section. R, Everfrost. R, Everfrost, get the slow, reposition, you get the charm, kill. Very straightforward. That's the power of Everfrost right there. Allows you to land that charm a lot more reliably. Now, look at the position you're in. Again, still 10 TS per minute. 3 and 1, 2 items, fed jungler. Wouldn't surprise me if he just complements his team. So here we go. Shoves all the way out. Gets a little bit of vision down. Looks like he was going to ping for a play topside. So that comes through. See what he can get done topside here. See his top's actually quite heavy trading. Okay. Yeah, a bit of an interesting one. I mean, I think he maybe could have been a little bit better with the ability usage. I would have liked to see Everfrost first then Charm, or even Charm then Everfrost rather than the Q, but ends up burning the, was that the Flash ult? Yeah, it was the Flash and ult. So still a worthwhile little roam there. Team comes by. Holy moly. So it looks like he's kiting around with his team. Let's just take a look at this one here. So his team's very far away. Pantheon's not here. Echo's not here. Has ultimates, trying to bait him into the Aksham from what it seems. Runs into him. We're able to take that one. Ends up getting clipped by the Thresh and the Zac. Looks like he wants to go back in because he knows the Pantheon's ulting in. Tries to bait the team in a little bit longer. So definitely knows his limits there. Okay, fast forwarding a little bit, comes back. Probably, I'm assuming, working towards Horizon Focus. Shoves outside. He's got TP coming up in 20 seconds here. Because he's versing such a low-range composition, no one really has threat onto him as long as he has that Everfrost. Renekton really can't do anything into an AHRI. I mean, as you can see there, proc that first strike from a distance, farm gold off this Renekton. Look for nice little short trades, setting up your Q with the Everfrost there. Pretty straightforward. We see everyone on vision, so he doesn't need to be afraid to use Everfrost and Charm aggressively. Keep bot lane shoved out. Fast forward a little bit here. This is relatively straightforward. Typically in mid-game like this, your mindset is shove and move. Because the enemy doesn't seem to be contesting his team and his Echo was in base, you can just stay mid and chill. If a fight breaks out around mid, you can just shove and move and get to the play first. Again, check out that farm. Still very, very consistent farm. Shove this out. Recalls. Has TP. TP's back in. Beautiful, straightforward, all in there. Nice little pick. Notice how he's shoving and moving and complementing his team. And this is what AHRI is really good at. Coming in from the sides. Ideally, you would have Sweeper there. Fishing for opportunistic charms. And now the game looks relatively over. The El Clasico shove and move. AHRI is very, very good at shoving and moving like that. Keeps the side lane shoved out. Reset for death cap. And again, right now, all you would really want to see is playing around the next objective. Baron or Dragon. If he thinks they're going to contest, tries to move around the next objective, tries to get here a little bit late. Relatively straightforward. So, you know, guys, as you can see here, AHRI is one of those champions that's very focused on the execution. You can understand all this stuff as much as you want. You can understand the Everfrost and how to use it. You can understand your role in the composition. You can understand what you need to do with the Qs and all that. But you got to feel it out, guys. AHRI is a champion that requires a lot of games, a lot of patience, and a lot of poise. Had fun with it. If you'd like me to expand on anything that we covered here today, let me know. Otherwise, good luck with your AHRI journey. Cheers.